I never understood why my husband suddenly needed his secretary to accompany him on every business trip until I saw them kissing at our anniversary dinner, a dinner I had spent months planning. As Shawn passionately embraced Gabriella Wright, in front of our closest friends and family, everything crystallized with painful clarity. The late nights at the office, the secret phone calls, the sudden interest in his appearance. My husband of 8 years had orchestrated the perfect platform for my public humiliation. The crystal champagne flute trembled slightly in my hand. As Shawn clinked his glass with a silver spoon, drawing everyone's attention. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Our anniversary celebration was in full swing at La Maison, an upscale restaurant I'd booked months in advance. The private dining room glowed with soft amber lighting, reflecting off the faces of 30 of our closest friends and family members. I had spent weeks coordinating with the chef to create Shawn's favorite menu, had arranged for a string quartet to play our wedding song, had even worn the sapphire blue dress he once said made my eyes sparkle. Before we continue celebrating our anniversary, Shawn began, his voice carrying an unfamiliar edge that made my skin prickle, I have an important announcement to make. I smiled expectantly, assuming he was about to thank me for planning this beautiful evening, or perhaps announce a surprise vacation, our long-delayed trip to Greece maybe. Instead, he slowly reached for Gabriella's hand, his fingers interlacing with hers in a gesture of intimacy that made my stomach lurch. Kayla, he said, finally meeting my eyes with an expression not of guilt, but of almost righteous determination. I've realized something over these past few months. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, and we find happiness where we least expect it. The room fell silent. I felt my mother's hand on my shoulder, her fingers tightening in what must have been anticipatory comfort. Somehow, she had sensed what was coming before I allowed myself to acknowledge it. Gabriella and I have fallen in love, Shawn announced, his voice steady while my world imploded. We never meant for this to happen, but when two souls connect the way ours have, you can't ignore that kind of bond. Gabriella, my husband's secretary of just 2 years, stepped closer to him, her crimson dress, that I'd complimented just 20 minutes earlier, catching the light as she moved. The young woman I'd invited into our home for dinner parties, the woman who'd sent me birthday cards and asked for my advice about office politics, now stood beside my husband with her hand possessively on his arm. We wanted to be honest with everyone, she added, her voice carrying that saccharine tone I now recognized as calculated rather than sweet. Especially you, Kayla. You deserve the truth, and we didn't want to continue living a lie. Someone gasped, probably my sister Emma, always quick to react. But it was the scattered, nervous laughter that followed that truly cut deep. These people, our friends, our family, were actually finding awkward humor in this moment of my complete devastation. I caught glimpses of uncomfortable smiles, witnessed the raising of glasses in confused congratulations as Shawn continued speaking about new chapters and authentic love. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "How dare you?" he started, his face flushed with anger. But I raised my hand, silencing him. This was my humiliation, my marriage disintegrating before an audience, my moment to control. I stood slowly, smoothing the blue dress I had so carefully chosen for this occasion. The weight of 30 pairs of eyes pressed against me as the silence thickened. "Well," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I suppose this explains the mysterious weekend conferences and the new cologne I didn't recognize." I took a deliberate sip of champagne, using the moment to compose myself. "And Gabriella, dear, now I understand why you were so interested in which evening I'd be planning this celebration. How thoughtful of you both to choose our anniversary for this charming announcement." Shawn had the audacity to look uncomfortable. "Kayla, we didn't want to hurt you." "No," I interrupted. setting my glass down with precise control, though every cell in my body screamed for me to throw it. Perhaps you shouldn't have chosen our 8th anniversary dinner for this little revelation. But then again, I turned to Gabriella. You always did have impeccable timing, didn't you? The diamond bracelet Shawn had given me for our 5th anniversary suddenly felt heavy on my wrist. With deliberate care, I unclasped it and placed it next to my champagne glass, the diamonds catching the light as they settled onto the pristine, white tablecloth. You'll regret this, I said softly, but with absolute conviction. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The slight falter in Gabriella's practiced smile, the momentary uncertainty that flickered across Shawn's face told me they caught my meaning. Kayla. Gabriella stepped forward, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I stepped back, my movement so smooth it made her gesture appear clumsy and inappropriate. Thank you all for coming to celebrate tonight. I addressed the room, my voice carrying the warmth of an Arctic wind. Please enjoy the dinner Gabriella helped me select. After all, I smiled directly at her. She certainly knows Shawn's appetites better than I do now. As I walked out of La Maison that night, head high and steps measured, I heard the explosion of conversations behind me. Let them talk. Let them speculate. They had no idea what was coming, because while Shawn and Gabriella had spent months planning their grand revelation, they'd forgotten one crucial detail about me. Behind my role as the supportive wife and gracious hostess was a woman they'd severely underestimated. They thought this public humiliation was the end of my story. They were wrong. This was just the beginning. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk, and I finally allowed myself a small, genuine smile. They thought tonight was their dramatic finale, but they had unwittingly set the stage for my most spectacular performance yet. Shawn had always told me I was too nice, that I let people walk all over me. How ironic that he would be the one to finally cure me of that particular character flaw. As I slid into the taxi, I felt something crystallize inside me. Not grief, not rage, but something colder and more focused. Something that would make Shawn and Gabriella wish they'd never met each other, let alone humiliated me in front of everyone who mattered. My phone began buzzing with concerned messages. I turned it off without reading a single one. I didn't need sympathy or outrage. I needed clarity. And for the first time in our marriage, Shawn had given me exactly what I needed. The perfect motivation to become someone he wouldn't recognize. Someone he would soon deeply regret betraying. The taxi driver kept glancing at me in the rear view mirror, probably wondering why a woman in an evening gown was staring so intently out the window with dry eyes. I gave him the address of a hotel downtown instead of our suburban home. The thought of walking into the house Shawn and I had shared for 8 years, with his scent still lingering on our pillows and his favorite coffee mug still in the dishwasher, was unbearable. Bad night? The driver finally asked, breaking the silence. Transformative, I replied, surprising myself with the word choice. But it fit. Tonight wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of something else entirely. The 5-star hotel lobby was filled with well-dressed business people and tourists, none of whom gave me a second glance. The anonymity was refreshing after the piercing stares and whispered comments at the restaurant. I paid for 3 nights with the emergency credit card Shawn didn't know about, the one I'd maintained since before our marriage. Always have your own money, my grandmother had insisted. I never thought her advice would be my salvation. The hotel room was elegant but impersonal, exactly what I needed. I kicked off my heels and sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing myself to look at my phone. 43 text messages, 12 missed calls, 3 voicemails. I scrolled through them quickly. Emma. OMG. I can't believe what just happened. Where are you? Call me. Mom. Sweetheart, please let us know you're safe. Your father wants to go to your house. Dad. That bastard. I'm coming over. Elsa, my closest friend. I had no idea. None. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Call me when you can talk. I'm here for you. And then, predictably, Shawn. Kayla, we need to talk. This isn't how I wanted to do this. Please come home so we can discuss this like adults. Like adults. As if ambushing me at our anniversary dinner in front of our closest friends and family was the height of maturity, I deleted his message without responding. The last text made me pause. It was from Josh, Shawn's business partner. I had no idea what was planned tonight. That was inexcusable. If you need anything at all, please let me know. I set the phone down, without replying to anyone. Tomorrow would be time enough for conversations. Tonight was for planning. I ordered room service, a bottle of their most expensive champagne and a slice of chocolate cake. If Shawn were here, he'd lecture me about the calories and the extravagance. But Shawn wasn't here. Shawn was probably celebrating his authentic love with his secretary. When the champagne arrived, I poured a glass and raised it to my reflection in the mirror across from the bed. To Kayla 2.0, I whispered. The version they never saw coming. The champagne tasted better than any I'd ever had with Shawn. I kicked off my heels and padded to the luxurious bathroom, where I ran a bath with every complimentary product the hotel offered. As I soaked in the fragrant water, I mentally cataloged what I knew about Shawn and Gabriella. Shawn, the successful investment banker who built his reputation on careful risk assessment and strategic planning. The man who color-coded our spice rack and maintained spreadsheets for our household expenses. The husband who couldn't stand unpredictability or public scenes, which made tonight's performance all the more calculated. He must have been desperate to orchestrate something so messy. And Gabriella, the efficient secretary with the spectacular memory and talent for organization. The woman who remembered every client's birthday and children's names. Who had systematically ingratiated herself with everyone at the firm, including me, who had asked so many seemingly innocent questions about our marriage, our finances, our future plans. A bitter laugh escaped me as I realized how methodically she must have gathered intelligence on my life before she made her move on my husband. I had to admire her thoroughness, even as I planned her downfall. My phone buzzed again from the bedroom. I ignored it, sinking deeper into the water. The tears finally came then, not gentle drops, but racking sobs that echoed against the marble bathroom walls. I allowed myself exactly 10 minutes of this weakness, setting the timer on my watch. 10 minutes to mourn the death of my marriage, the betrayal of trust, the public humiliation. When the timer beeped, I wiped my face, stepped out of the bath, and wrapped myself in the plush hotel robe. The woman in the mirror looked different, all ready, eyes clearer, jaw set with determination. The grieving wife was gone. In her place stood someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. My phone buzzed incessantly as I worked through the night. I systematically changed the passwords on all our joint accounts: banking, investment, social media, email. Shawn had always relied on me to manage these details, too busy with important work to be bothered with such mundane tasks. His laziness would now be his undoing. By 3 a.m., I had drafted emails to our family lawyer, our financial advisor, and my old boss at the marketing firm I'd left when Shawn insisted I focus on supporting his career. Each message was carefully worded, professional, rather than emotional, each step methodically planned. At 4 a.m., Shawn finally came pounding on the hotel room door. I knew he would find me eventually, probably called every hotel in the city until he located me. I didn't open the door. Kayla, I know you're in there, he called, his voice carrying that particular tone of annoyance he used when I wasn't behaving according to his expectations. We need to talk about this like rational people. Open the door. I remained silent, watching his shadow move beneath the door. This is ridiculous, he continued, his voice growing louder. You're making a scene. The least you could do is hear me out I smiled at the irony. I was making a scene after his public announcement at our anniversary dinner. "I'll be at the house tomorrow," he finally said. "We can discuss the arrangements then. This doesn't have to be ugly, Kayla." His footsteps retreated down the hallway. I returned to my laptop, my resolve strengthening with every passing minute. Oh, but it would be ugly, Shawn. Just not in the way he anticipated. By dawn, I had the skeleton of a plan forming. Not the impulsive reaction Shawn would be expecting, but something far more calculated. Something worthy of the meticulous banker who'd taught me the value of patient strategy. As the first light of morning filtered through the hotel curtains, I finally allowed myself to sleep, dreaming not of reconciliation or forgiveness, but of the exquisite moment when Shawn and Gabriella would realize exactly what they had set in motion with their little anniversary surprise. 3 days after the anniversary disaster, I checked out of the hotel and disappeared from everyone's radar. Not physically, of course, but socially. I became a ghost, an absence that grew more conspicuous with each unanswered call and unread message. I rented a modest apartment in the arts district across town, using my maiden name on the lease. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now living in a space smaller than the walk-in closet Shawn had built for me as an anniversary gift 2 years ago. But this sparse one-bedroom apartment with its exposed brick walls and large windows offered something our sprawling suburban home never had: freedom from pretense. My phone continued to explode with notifications. Every ring, every buzz represented someone demanding a piece of me, my reaction, my tears, my forgiveness, or my rage. They all wanted something, and for the first time in my adult life, I chose to give nothing. Emma's calls became increasingly frantic. "Kayla, this isn't like you. Everyone's worried. Just let us know you're okay." My mother left tearful voicemails. "Sweetheart, please. Your father and I just want to help. You don't have to go through this alone." Elsa texted hourly updates on the gossip circulating. "People are taking sides. Most are with you." Gabriella's sister deleted all her social media accounts after the backlash. I read everything but responded to nothing. Their concern, while genuine, would only slow me down, soften my resolve with sympathy and platitudes about better off without him and time heals all wounds. I didn't want healing. I wanted justice. Shawn's messages evolved from commanding to pleading to threatening. "We need to discuss divorce arrangements. Be reasonable. Please just tell me where you are. This silent treatment is childish. If you don't respond, I'll have no choice but to proceed without your input." His final text made me laugh out loud in my empty apartment. "Kayla, I'm getting worried." This isn't like you. That was precisely the point. The Kayla he knew, the accommodating wife who organized his life, hosted his business dinners, and overlooked his late meetings, no longer existed. He had killed her at La Maison, and he hadn't even realized it yet. On my 4th day of self-imposed exile, I methodically cut my hair, watching the honey-blonde locks fall around me on the bathroom floor. The shoulder-length bob reflected a sharper face in the mirror, highlighting cheekbones that had always been there but somehow seemed more pronounced now. I colored it a deeper, richer brown, not drastically different, but enough that it would take a moment for people to recognize me. That moment of hesitation was all I needed. I spent my days setting up my new life with meticulous precision. A new bank account under my maiden name, a new phone number known only to my lawyer, a new email address for professional correspondence. My nights were dedicated to research. The leather-bound journal Shawn had given me for Christmas became my war plan. In it, I documented everything I knew about Shawn's business dealings, his clients, his investments, his habits, and his weaknesses. 8 years of marriage had given me intimate knowledge of the man's every vulnerability, and now I categorized them with clinical detachment, fear of public embarrassment, obsession with professional reputation, reliance on routine aversion to Financial instability, deep-seated insecurity about his humble origins. Each item on the list represented a pressure point I could leverage when the time was right. Gabriella received similar treatment on the adjacent pages. Her meteoric rise from entry-level receptionist to executive assistant in just 2 years. Her carefully cultivated relationships with every senior partner at the firm. Her social media presence, which had been scrubbed of anything controversial, but still revealed patterns. A preoccupation with luxury brands she couldn't possibly afford on her salary, frequent check-ins at expensive restaurants, a rotating cast of influential friends. The picture that emerged was fascinating. Gabriella wasn't in love with Shawn. She was in love with what he represented: status, security, and social advancement. Shawn wasn't in love with Gabriella. He was in love with her youth, her admiration, and most importantly, her willingness to reshape herself to suit his needs. They deserved each other. And they would destroy each other without much help from me, but I would certainly accelerate the process. A week into my disappearance, I received an email from Josh, Shawn's business partner, Kayla. I respect your privacy and understand your need for space, but I thought you should know that Shawn has been telling clients and colleagues that you're taking some time at a wellness retreat to deal with emotional issues. Gabriella has already moved some of her things into your house. I've known Shawn for 15 years, but I don't recognize the man he's become. What happened at that dinner was unforgivable. If you need anything, professional references, introductions, or just someone who knows the real story, please don't hesitate to reach out. Josh. I saved the email without responding. Josh's information was useful, but I wasn't ready to trust anyone connected to Shawn, no matter how well-intentioned they seemed. That night, I allowed myself to look at photos from my old life, vacation snapshots, holiday gatherings, dinner parties where Shawn, and I played the perfect hosts. In each image, I searched my own face for signs that I had known, had suspected, had somehow sensed the betrayal coming. What I found instead was more disturbing. A woman who had gradually dimmed her own light to make someone else shine brighter. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. In earlier photos, my smile reached my eyes, my posture was confident, my gaze direct. In more recent images, I had become a complement to Shawn, always positioned slightly behind him, my expression pleasant but muted, my style increasingly conservative and understated. I hadn't just been betrayed by my husband and his secretary, I had been complicit in my own diminishment. That realization burned worse than the betrayal itself. As I closed the photo album, my resolve crystallized. This wasn't just about making Shawn and Gabriella regret their actions. This was about reclaiming the woman I had been before I started shrinking myself to fit into someone else's idea of a perfect wife. 2 weeks after I vanished from Shawn's life, I finally responded to one message, an email to my lawyer initiating divorce proceedings. My terms were clear, comprehensive, and left no room for negotiation. I had documented every business dinner I had hosted, every client I had charmed, every connection I had facilitated that had advanced Shawn's career. I had been his unpaid PR consultant, event planner, and social secretary for 8 years, and I intended to be compensated accordingly. The response came within hours. Shawn was shocked by my unreasonable demands and concerned about my emotional state. Good. Let him be concerned. Let him wonder. Let him finally realize that he had never really known me at all. By the 3rd week of my self-imposed exile, I was ready to execute the first phase of my plan, reconstruction. Before I could destroy Shawn and Gabriella's perfect new life, I needed to build my own. On the morning of the 23rd day after my public humiliation, I woke up with absolute clarity. The fog of betrayal had lifted completely, leaving behind a crystalline purpose that energized every cell in my body. I no longer felt like Shawn's abandoned wife. I felt like a strategist preparing for the most important campaign of my life. New apartment had gradually transformed from a sparse refuge to a war room. The dining table was covered with documents, financial statements from our marriage, printouts of Shawn's company's public records, social media profiles for both Shawn and Gabriella, and most importantly, a detailed timeline of their relationship that I had reconstructed from my memories and digital evidence. I stood at the window, watching the city come alive below me. The arts district was nothing like our manicured suburban neighborhood. Here, people moved with purpose and passion, rather than the careful social choreography I'd grown accustomed to. Artists, musicians, and entrepreneurs filled the coffee shops and co-working spaces. Nobody knew me here. Nobody had expectations about how I should behave or who I should be. The anonymity was intoxicating. My phone rang. Emma again. This time I answered. "Oh my God, Kayla." Her voice was thick with relief. "You're alive. Where have you been? Everyone's been worried sick." "I needed some time," I said, surprised by the calm detachment in my voice. "I'm fine." "Fine? How can you be fine?" "Shawn's telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown. He and that woman are already living together in your house. They're using your china, Kayla. Your wedding china." I felt nothing at this revelation. No pain, no outrage, just cool assessment of useful information. "Let them," I said. "Let them. Who are you and what have you done with my sister? The Kayla I know would never—" "The Kayla you knew doesn't exist anymore," I interrupted. "Shawn and Gabriella killed her at La Maison 3 weeks ago." Silence filled the line as Emma processed my words. "What do you need?" she finally asked, her voice smaller now. "How can I help?" This was why I'd always loved my sister. When others offered sympathy, Emma offered support. "I need information," I said. "Eyes and ears in our social circle. But Emma, this has to stay between us. Mom and Dad can know I'm safe, but nothing else." "Can you do that?" "Of course," she responded without hesitation. "But Kayla, what are you planning?" "Justice," I said simply. "Not revenge, justice." After hanging up with Emma, I opened my laptop and did something I should have done years ago. I updated my resume. The document looked embarrassingly sparse at first. 8 years as wife didn't translate well to marketable skills. But then I began to reframe my experience. Event planning for dinners and parties became coordinated high-level networking events for industry executives. Managing our household finances became budget oversight and financial planning. The charity committee I'd chaired at Shawn's insistence became nonprofit leadership and community relations. By the time I finished, I had 3 pages of solid, transferable skills that told the story of a capable professional who had been working all along, just without the title or salary. I sent the resume to 3 recruitment agencies with a cover letter explaining my career sabbatical and desire to re-enter the workforce. Next, I made an appointment with Asher Donovan, a forensic accountant whose name I'd found in an article about high-profile divorces. Shawn had always handled our major financial decisions, dismissing my questions with patronizing explanations about concepts that were too complex for my understanding. I'd accepted this arrangement, telling myself it was practical rather than problematic. Now I wondered what else I had accepted that I shouldn't have. Asher's office was in a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed beams and glass partitions. The man himself was nothing like I'd expected, younger than me by a few years, with bright blue eyes that missed nothing and an easy smile that put me immediately at ease. "So," he said after I'd explained my situation, "you think your husband has been hiding assets?" "I don't think I know," I corrected him. "The question is how much and where." Asher's eyebrows rose slightly. "Most clients come in here emotional, Mrs. Reynolds. You're remarkably analytical about all this." "It's Ms. Taylor now," I said, reverting to my maiden name. "And emotions won't help me get what I deserve." He nodded, something like respect flickering across his face. "Well, Ms. Taylor, let's see what we can find. I'll need access to as many financial documents as you can provide. Bank statements, tax returns, investment portfolios. I've already prepared everything I could access," I said, handing him a USB drive. But Shawn kept certain accounts private. "Those are the ones I'm most interested in." Asher plugged in the drive and scanned the files I'd organized. His eyebrows rose higher. "This is extremely thorough. Most people don't even know where to begin." "I've had 3 weeks with nothing but time and motivation," I said with a small smile. "And I'm a quick study." By the end of our 2-hour meeting, Asher had identified 3 suspicious patterns in Shawn's financial behavior over the past 2 years. Exactly how long Gabriella had been his secretary. Regular cash withdrawals that didn't match our lifestyle expenses. A consulting LLC formed without my knowledge. And most damning of all, a series of transfers to an offshore account that coincided with his business trips. The same trips he'd started taking Gabriella on. "He's been planning this for a while," Asher said, his voice gentler now, "preparing for a separation financially while maintaining the appearance of a shared life." I nodded, absorbing this confirmation of Shawn's calculated betrayal without flinching. "Can we prove it?" "With time and resources, absolutely. The question is, what do you want to do with this information?" I considered the question carefully. "First, I want everything I'm legally entitled to, not a penny less. Second, I want him to know that I know exactly what he did and how he did it." "And third?" Asher asked, clearly sensing there was more. I smiled, the expression feeling foreign on my face. "Third, I want to use what I've learned from him against him. Shawn always said I wasn't strategic enough, that I didn't understand how the world really works. I think it's time I show him how much I've learned." After leaving Asher's office, I walked to a small boutique I'd discovered in my new neighborhood. The owner, a former corporate lawyer who'd left the rat race to pursue her passion for fashion, had become something of a confidant during my self-imposed exile. "The transformation begins today," I told her as I entered the shop. 3 hours. Later, I emerged with a completely new wardrobe. Gone were the soft pastels and conservative cuts that Shawn had always preferred. In their place were streamlined silhouettes in bold colors and luxurious fabrics that made me feel powerful rather than pretty. That evening, I received my first job offer, a marketing position at a boutique firm specializing in female-founded startups. The salary was modest compared to what Shawn earned, but it was mine, earned through my own merits, rather than given as an allowance from a controlling husband. As I celebrated with a glass of wine on my tiny balcony, I felt the last pieces of my old identity fall away. The grieving, abandoned wife was gone. In her place stood a woman with purpose, plans, and most dangerously for Shawn and Gabriella, nothing left to lose. I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence on a fresh page. Day 1 of the rest of my life. The victim phase of my journey was officially over. The strategist had taken control, and she had very specific targets in her sights. My first week at Vertex Marketing was a revelation. After years of arranging my schedule around Shawn's needs and social obligations, I now structured my days according to my own priorities. I arrived early, stayed late, and absorbed every aspect of the business with an intensity that impressed my new colleagues. "You're catching on faster than anyone I've ever hired," remarked Elsa Montgomery, the firm's founder and my new boss. What she didn't know was that I'd been studying marketing strategies for years, reading the books Shawn left untouched on our shelves, analyzing campaigns while he dismissed them as just ads, developing concepts he would never have time to hear. While I established my new professional identity, I was simultaneously building a comprehensive intelligence file on Shawn and Gabriella's lives. Emma had proven to be an invaluable source of information, feeding me regular updates from our social circle. They hosted their first dinner party last night, she reported during our weekly encrypted call, a precaution that probably wasn't necessary but satisfied my newfound appreciation for strategic thinking. Used your good china and your recipes, but apparently the soufflé collapsed and the salmon was overcooked. I smiled at this small failure. Gabriella had always claimed to be an excellent cook, one of the many coincidental interests she shared with Shawn. Who attended? I asked, making notes in my journal. The Millers, the Prestons, and the Taylors. Oh, and Josh was invited but declined, sent a bottle of wine with his regrets. Interesting. Josh continuing to distance himself could be useful later. Any business talk? Plenty, Emma confirmed. Shawn was bragging about some new client. Westridge Capital? Said it was a game changer for the firm. I noted the name. Westridge Capital was a major player in sustainable investments, exactly the kind of forward-thinking client Shawn had been pursuing for years. This success would make him feel secure, confident, perhaps even invincible. Perfect. What about Gabriella? How is she settling into the role of hostess? Emma's laugh contained a hint of malice. Trying too hard. Wore a dress almost identical to the one you wore at your last Christmas party. Caroline Miller noticed and mentioned it loud enough for everyone to hear. I could picture the scene. Gabriella's embarrassment, Shawn's discomfort, the awkward glances exchanged by guests who were still processing this abrupt replacement. Social humiliation would be eating away at Gabriella, who had always been so careful about appearances. While Emma kept me informed about their social lives, Asher was unearthing Shawn's financial secrets with methodical precision. We met weekly, at a coffee shop far from my old neighborhood, where he would share his latest discoveries. Your husband has been busy, he told me during our third meeting, sliding a folder across the table. The offshore account was just the beginning. He's set up an entire shadow financial structure. I reviewed the documents, noting the complex web of LLCs and investment vehicles that Shawn had created, all carefully separated from our marital assets. Can we trace when this started? Asher nodded. Almost exactly when Gabriella became his secretary. The first LLC was formed 2 weeks after she was hired. The timeline confirmed what I had suspected. Their affair hadn't been some passionate, spontaneous connection. It had been calculated from the beginning, with Gabriella as either willing collaborator or master manipulator. Either way, they deserved each other, and they deserved what was coming. There's something else, Asher said, his expression more serious. I found irregularities in some of the client billing records you provided. Certain clients were charged for services that don't match the firm's standard offerings. Meaning either your husband is providing specialized services off the books, or he's padding the bills. This was unexpected gold. Shawn had always prided himself on his ethical standards, at least publicly. The discovery of potential financial impropriety provided leverage I hadn't anticipated. Can we prove it definitively? Asher hesitated. We'd need internal documents from the firm. Billing codes, client contracts, that sort of thing. I thought about Josh and his apparent discomfort with Shawn's recent behavior. Perhaps it was time to test his offer of assistance. My intelligence gathering extended beyond Shawn and Gabriella's present circumstances to include their pasts. I hired a discreet private investigator to conduct background checks more thorough than anything they would have anticipated. The results on Shawn were unsurprising. His carefully constructed image as a self-made success contained the expected embellishments but no major deceptions. Gabriella's history, however, proved far more interesting. Miss Lancaster has reinvented herself several times, the investigator explained when delivering his report. Changed her name from Gabriella Mendez when she moved to this city 5 years ago. Before that, she was involved in a rather messy situation with another married employer in Chicago. No charges filed, but a substantial private settlement was paid. I absorbed this information with growing satisfaction. Gabriella wasn't just an opportunistic secretary. She was a serial predator with a specific methodology. Shawn wasn't her first married boss, just her most recent target. The investigator continued, "There's also the matter of her educational credentials. The MBA from Northwestern she claims on her resume? No record of her graduation. She attended for 1 semester, then dropped out." This explained why she had been so reluctant to discuss her graduate experience when I'd asked about it during our seemingly friendly lunches. All those times I had tried to connect with her, she had been assessing me as an obstacle rather than a friend. With each piece of intelligence I gathered, a clearer strategy emerged. Shawn's vulnerabilities were professional. His reputation, his standing with clients, his carefully maintained image as an ethical businessman. Gabriella's weaknesses were more personal. Her fabricated background, her pattern of targeting married men, her desperation for status and security. I could destroy them individually, but allowing them to destroy each other would be far more satisfying. By the 6-week mark of my new life, my apartment walls displayed an elaborate mind map connecting all the information I had gathered. Red threads linked Shawn's financial improprieties to specific dates and events. Blue threads tracked Gabriella's movements and inconsistencies. Yellow threads identified their vulnerabilities, individually and as a couple. The picture it created was one of mutual exploitation rather than love. Shawn saw Gabriella as a trophy and accomplice. Gabriella saw Shawn as a stepping stone and meal ticket. Neither truly knew who they had aligned themselves with, and neither was prepared for who I was becoming. As I studied the web of information before me, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a message from Josh. "Need to talk. S's new client raising red flags, ethical concerns. Dinner tomorrow?" I smiled as I sent my acceptance. Another thread to add to my tapestry. Another pressure point to exploit when the time was right. That night, I stood before my bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at me. My new haircut framed a face that seemed sharper, more defined. My eyes held a focus that had been missing during my years with Shawn. Even my posture had changed. Shoulders back, chin lifted, the stance of someone who expected to be taken seriously. "Hello, Kayla," I whispered to my reflection. "Nice to finally meet you." The restaurant Josh chose for our meeting was deliberately nondescript. A small Italian place downtown, far from the upscale establishments where Shawn networked and showcased his success. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a view of the entrance. Old habits from my marriage had me reaching for the menu item Shawn would have approved of. A modest salad, nothing too indulgent. I caught myself and deliberately ordered the rich mushroom risotto and a glass of Barolo instead. Josh entered precisely on time, scanning the room before spotting me. His momentary hesitation told me what I already knew. I looked different. "Good. Kayla," he said, taking the seat across from me. "Thank you for meeting me. You look transformed." I smiled, a genuine expression that felt increasingly natural. Amazing what freedom does for a woman's appearance. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize again for what happened. If I'd known what Shawn was planning— "You didn't," I interrupted, maintaining my pleasant expression. "And that's not why we're here. You mentioned ethical concerns about Shawn's new client?" Josh studied me for a moment, clearly reassessing whatever preconceptions he'd had about our meeting. Good. Let him see that the agreeable, supportive woman who had hosted his family for holiday dinners was gone. "Yes," he finally said, lowering his voice. "Westridge Capital. The deal Shawn brought in. It's not what it seems. I found irregularities in their financials that Shawn is deliberately overlooking." "What kind of irregularities?" Josh hesitated again. "The kind that could trigger an SEC investigation if they came to light. The kind that could damage not just Shawn, but the entire firm if we're associated with them." I sipped my wine, letting the information settle. "And you've raised these concerns with Shawn?" "Repeatedly. He dismisses them, says I'm being overly cautious, that this is how business is done at the highest levels." Josh's frustration was evident in the tight set of his jaw. Gabriella is encouraging him. She's been sitting in on meetings. She has no business attending, making suggestions about client management that cross every professional boundary. Fascinating. Gabriella was overplaying her hand, pushing too far too quickly. Shawn, blind with infatuation or something more calculating, was allowing his professional judgment to falter. "Why come to me with this?" I asked, although I already suspected the answer. "Because you know Shawn better than anyone. You might be the only person he would actually listen to." I laughed then, a sound so genuine it surprised even me. "Josh, I'm the last person Shawn would listen to right now. He's constructed a narrative where I'm the unstable, emotional ex who couldn't handle his authentic new relationship. Anything coming from me would be automatically dismissed." Josh frowned. "Then why did you agree to meet?" "Information is power," I said simply. "And I appreciate knowing where things stand with Shawn's career. Now tell me more about these irregularities." For the next hour, Josh detailed his concerns about Westridge Capital, inflated assets, questionable revenue sources, unusual transfer patterns that suggested money laundering. As he spoke, I took mental notes, connecting this new information with what Asher had already discovered about Shawn's personal financial maneuvers. "What will you do with this information?" Josh finally asked as our dinner plates were cleared. I smiled. "Nothing immediately, but I believe in preparation." "Preparation for what?" "For whatever comes next," I said, deliberately vague. "Josh, can I ask you something? Why didn't you warn me about Gabriella? You must have seen what was happening." He had the decency to look ashamed. "I saw something, but Shawn convinced everyone it was innocent mentorship. By the time I realized it was too late." He paused. "I should have said something anyway. I'm sorry." I nodded, accepting his apology without offering absolution. "One more question. Do you have copies of the Westridge documentation you're concerned about?" Josh's expression grew cautious. "I do." "Why?" "Insurance," I said. "For both of us." After a moment's hesitation, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive. "Be careful with this, Kayla. Very careful." I slipped it into my purse, feeling another piece of the puzzle slide into place. The following morning marked exactly 2 months since the anniversary dinner. I celebrated by signing the lease on a new apartment. Not another temporary hiding place, but a statement piece in a luxury building downtown. The 2-bedroom space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a wraparound balcony cost more per month than I had ever spent on anything without Shawn's approval. But my rapidly growing client portfolio at Vertex made it comfortably affordable. "This is quite a change from your current place," the real estate agent commented as I signed the papers. "I'm quite a changed woman," I replied with a smile. That afternoon, I met with a personal styling consultant recommended by one of Vertex's fashion industry clients. After years of dressing to fade into the background of Shawn's life, I was ready to command attention on my own terms. "Your coloring is extraordinary," the stylist observed as she studied me. "All these years in neutrals and pastels when you should have been wearing jewel tones and statement pieces." We spent 3 hours rebuilding my wardrobe from the ground up. Gone were the conservative shift dresses and sensible pumps Shawn had always praised as classic and appropriate. In their place came structured blazers in rich emerald and sapphire, sleek trousers that emphasized my height, and dresses that celebrated rather than concealed my curves. "Your ex-husband was an idiot," the stylist declared, as I emerged from the dressing room in a crimson sheath dress that made me feel powerful enough to conquer continents. "On that, we completely agree," I laughed. By evening, I had appointments. For a more sophisticated haircut, a session with a makeup artist for everyday techniques that enhanced rather than masked my features, and, most surprisingly, my first ever tattoo consultation. The small phoenix design I was considering represented more than rebellion against Shawn's disapproval of permanent body modifications. It symbolized my emergence from the ashes of a marriage that had slowly consumed me. That night, I received my first communication from Shawn in weeks. A terse email from his lawyer indicating he was generously offering a settlement that amounted to roughly 18% of our actual marital assets. I forwarded it to my attorney with a single word: laughable. My lawyer's response came within minutes. Given what we now know about his financials, indeed, counter-offering next week as discussed. The confidence in her message reflected our strengthened position, bolstered by Asher's findings and now Josh's information about Westridge. Shawn thought he was dealing with the same accommodating woman who had deferred to his judgment for 8 years. He was about to discover his catastrophic miscalculation. The next morning, I did something I had postponed for weeks. I changed my relationship status on social media from married to single. Within minutes, notifications flooded my phone, as friends and acquaintances reacted with shocked comments and sympathy messages. I ignored them all, instead posting a single photo, me in my new crimson dress, standing on the balcony of my soon-to-be new apartment, the city skyline behind. Me as the sun set in brilliant gold and orange. The caption read simply, "Phoenix Rising." Later that day, Emma texted, "Shawn saw your post. Never seen him so rattled. Kept checking his phone during a business lunch with potential clients. Gabriella looked like she'd swallowed something sour." I smiled at the update. The first small tremor before the earthquake. Time to increase the pressure. That evening, I accepted an invitation I would have declined just months ago, a networking event hosted by one of Vertex's most influential clients. I arrived wearing an outfit that announced my transformation without saying a word, a midnight blue jumpsuit that conveyed confidence without trying too hard, accessorized with a single striking piece of jewelry, a silver phoenix pendant that rested just below my collarbone. As I circulated through the crowd, introducing myself with my maiden name and my new professional title, I felt a sense of authentic power I had never experienced as Shawn's wife. Here, people were interested in my ideas, my expertise, my perspective, not my connection to a successful husband. 3 different executives asked for my business card. 2 potential clients requested meetings. 1 particularly forward venture capitalist asked me to dinner, which I declined with a smile that left the door deliberately ajar for future professional collaboration. By the time I returned to my apartment that night, Kayla Taylor, rising marketing consultant, professional in her own right, woman with a plan, felt more real than Kayla Reynolds had in years. The transformation wasn't just external, it had penetrated to my core. I updated my war room wall with new information from Josh, stepping back to admire the intricate web of connections. The trap was nearly set. Soon, very soon, it would be time to spring it. 3 months after the anniversary dinner, I moved into my new apartment. Unlike my temporary refuge, this place wasn't just somewhere to hide. It was a statement. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, including, ironically, the financial district where Shawn's office was located. From my living room, I could quite literally look down on his workplace. The timing of my move was strategic. That same week, Emma informed me that Shawn and Gabriella had sent out invitations to a housewarming party, officially unveiling their relationship to our wider social circle in what had once been my home. The invitations described it as a new beginning celebration. "Everyone's talking about the tackiness of it," Emma reported. "Hosting a party in the same house where he lived with you for 8 years, barely 3 months after... Well, you know. Who's attending?" I asked, arranging a striking piece of modern art on my living room wall, a bold contrast to the traditional landscapes Shawn had always preferred. About half the usual crowd. The Millers declined outright. Caroline told Gabriella she couldn't possibly celebrate something that began with such deceit. Others are making excuses. I smiled. Social consequences were already accumulating, exactly as I had anticipated. Perfect. Perfect? Kayla, what exactly are you planning? Justice, I said simply, administered with surgical precision. The first strategic piece I placed on the board was purely financial. After consulting with my lawyer and Asher, I authorized a counterproposal to Shawn's insulting settlement offer, one that included detailed documentation of his hidden assets and questionable financial maneuvers. This will blindside him, my lawyer warned. He's going to be furious. Good, I replied. Angry people make mistakes. The second move was more subtle. I arranged to have brunch at Bellini's, an upscale cafe where Gabriella often took her weekend coffee break, a habit I remembered from her countless mentions during our friendly conversations. I arrived with Elsa, my boss who had become a genuine friend during my professional renaissance. We claimed a table with perfect visibility from the entrance, timing our arrival for 30 minutes before Gabriella typically appeared. I wore one of my new power outfits, a tailored emerald green blazer over a silk shell with the phoenix pendant prominently displayed. Elsa, aware of only the broad strokes of my situation, provided the perfect conversational partner, intelligent, animated, and genuinely interested in the marketing strategy we were ostensibly there to discuss. At exactly 11:15, Gabriella entered the cafe, stopped short at the sight of me, then quickly composed herself and headed to a table as far from ours as possible. Is that her? Elsa murmured. I nodded almost imperceptibly, then deliberately refocused on our conversation, raising my voice just enough to ensure the next part would carry. The client absolutely loved the campaign pitch. They're increasing the budget by 40% and want us to handle their entire rebranding. Kayla, that's the third major account you've landed this month, Elsa responded, following my cue perfectly. The partners are already discussing your promotion track. I've never seen anyone advance this quickly. I allowed myself a satisfied smile, knowing Gabriella was straining to overhear while pretending to study her menu. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're finally in an environment that values your contributions. Throughout brunch, I never once directly acknowledged Gabriella's presence, but I made sure she overheard snippets about my new apartment, my expanding client, portfolio, and most importantly, my upcoming meeting with Westridge Capital, a potential new client for Vertex and, not coincidentally, Shawn's most important current client. As we prepared to leave, I finally made eye contact with Gabriella, giving her a small, knowing smile before turning away. The message was clear. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, and I was a threat. The third move in my long game came later that week, when I accepted an invitation to speak at a financial services marketing panel, an event I knew would be attended by several of Shawn's colleagues and clients. My topic, ethical transparency in financial marketing, was carefully chosen to establish my expertise while subtly drawing attention to the very issues plaguing Westridge Capital. I didn't mention Shawn or his firm directly. I didn't need to. The pointed questions I raised about due diligence and regulatory compliance were enough to plant seeds of doubt among the audience members familiar with Shawn's aggressive promotion of Westridge. Josh contacted me the day after the panel. Your presentation made waves. 3 clients have called with concerns about Westridge. Shawn is scrambling. What are you doing, Kayla? I replied with deliberate ambiguity. Sharing my professional expertise. Isn't that what we all should do? That weekend, I had my phoenix tattoo inked onto my right shoulder blade, small enough to be concealed when necessary, but visible with the right evening wear. The delicate outline in deep red ink represented more than just my personal transformation. It marked my commitment to seeing this through to the end. First tattoo? The artist asked as he finished the design. First everything, I replied. New life, new choices. As I left the studio, my phone buzzed with a notification. My lawyer had received Shawn's response to our counteroffer. His message was one word: impossible. I smiled, sending back our equally concise reply, non-negotiable. The long game was established. The pieces were in position. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Shawn and Gabriella now knew I wasn't the broken, desperate woman they had expected. I was something far more dangerous. A woman with nothing to lose, everything to gain, and the patience to wait for exactly the right moment to strike. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning, 4 months after the anniversary dinner. I was reviewing client proposals in my office at Vertex when my phone lit up with a text from Emma. OMG. Gabriella just got passed over for promotion to executive assistant. Shawn is furious. Apparently, the partners cited concerns about professional boundaries. I allowed myself a small smile. The carefully worded email I had sent to the HR director at Shawn's firm 2 weeks earlier, expressing my concern as a former client about the firm's policies regarding relationships between executives and their direct reports, had found its mark. I hadn't mentioned Shawn or Gabriella by name. I hadn't needed to. Any fallout? I texted back. Emma's response came quickly. S made a scene in the partners' meeting. G crying in bathroom. Rumors flying. Perfect. The first crack in their professional facade, and I hadn't directly done anything that could be traced back to me. Just a concerned citizen inquiring about corporate policies. My second move targeted their social standing. The annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital, an event I had co-chaired for years, was approaching. Traditionally, Shawn and I had purchased a premium table, hosting key clients and colleagues. This year, I made a donation 3 times our usual amount, but requested anonymity to focus on the cause rather than recognition. Then, through Emma, I ensured that Gabriella learned of the donation amount, which would put pressure on her and Shawn to match or exceed it. A financial stretch given Shawn's current legal expenses and the lifestyle upgrade Gabriella was demanding. IT. Phone rang that afternoon. Shawn's number. After months of communicating solely through lawyers, his direct call confirmed my strategy was working. I let it go to voicemail. Kayla. His voice sounded strained. This childish financial warfare needs to stop. The counterproposal is absurd. The charity donation is transparent manipulation. Call me back so we can discuss reasonable terms. I forwarded the voicemail to my lawyer with a note. Evidence of harassment. Please remind Mr. Reynolds that all communication should go through proper channels. An hour later, Shawn received a cease and desist letter regarding direct contact. Another small humiliation in front of his legal team. The third pressure point I activated was more subtle but potentially more damaging. Using the information Josh had provided about Westridge Capital's irregularities, I crafted a meticulously researched market analysis that highlighted risk factors in companies with Westridge's exact profile, without ever naming them specifically. The report was circulated to Vertex's financial sector clients, including 3 investment firms that did regular business with Shawn's company. Within days, one of these firms requested a meeting with Shawn to discuss concerns about their Westridge exposure. Another quietly began reducing their position in Westridge-related investments. The third reached out to Vertex, specifically requesting me to conduct a reputation management assessment. This last development was particularly satisfying. In the meeting, the investment firm's CEO mentioned that they had been impressed by my insights and were reconsidering certain strategic relationships based on my analysis. The beauty of these moves was their plausible deniability. I wasn't directly attacking Shawn or Gabriella. I was simply excelling in my new professional role, making charitable contributions, and inquiring about corporate policies. The consequences they experienced were natural results of their own actions and vulnerabilities. Josh called late one evening as I was updating my strategy wall with new information. Shawn's partnership review has been moved up 6 months, he reported, his voice low. The senior partners are concerned about his judgment regarding Westridge and his recent personal choices impacting firm reputation. How unfortunate, I replied, keeping my tone neutral while adding this new development to my timeline. This isn't just about Westridge anymore, is it? Josh asked. You're orchestrating something bigger. I'm focusing on my career, Josh. If Shawn's professional problems stem from his own poor decisions, that's hardly my responsibility. Kayla, his voice held a note of warning. Be careful. Shawn is getting desperate, and desperate people can be dangerous. I thought about the security system I'd had installed in my new apartment, the doorman I'd befriended with thoughtful gifts, the precautions I'd taken with my digital footprint. I'm always careful now, I assured him. It's one of many lessons Shawn taught me. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto my balcony, gazing at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Shawn and Gabriella were beginning to feel the ground shift beneath their feet. Not dramatically enough to send them tumbling yet, but enough to create the first tremors of doubt. 2 days later, Emma reported that Gabriella had been conspicuously absent from a client dinner, where partners' significant others were typically included. Shawn claimed she had a migraine, but Caroline Miller overheard him arguing on the phone with her just before dinner. Something about appearances and timing. The cracks were widening. That weekend brought the most visible sign yet that my strategy was working. I was having brunch at an outdoor cafe when I spotted them across the street, Shawn and Gabriella, engaged in a heated argument. Her gestures were animated, her face flushed with anger. He kept looking around, clearly concerned about who might be witnessing their dispute. I sipped my mimosa and observed without hiding. When Shawn finally noticed me, the shock on his face was palpable. I raised my glass in a small salute, then returned to my meal as they hurried away. Later that day, I received another voicemail from Shawn, this one markedly different in tone. This has gone far enough, Kayla. What do you want? Just tell me what it will take to end this. Progress. He was beginning to understand that the perfect life he had envisioned with Gabriella was unraveling, not through any grand, dramatic action on my part, but through a series of small, strategic moves that exploited the inherent weaknesses in their relationship and professional lives. The final element of my first phase came in the form of the charity gala itself. I attended alone, wearing a stunning red gown with a low back that displayed my phoenix tattoo. I had been briefly tempted to bring a date, the venture capitalist who had been persistent in his interest, but decided the visual impact of my solo entrance would be more powerful. I was right. The whispers began the moment I stepped into the ballroom. After months of near invisibility, my re-emergence as a confident, transformed woman created exactly the stir I had anticipated. When Shawn and Gabriella arrived 20 minutes later, the contrast was striking. He looked tense and tired, she overdressed and trying too hard. Throughout the evening, I circulated among the guests, reconnecting with old friends and making new professional contacts. I never once approached Shawn and Gabriella's table, but I made sure to be enthusiastically welcomed by the very social circles that were increasingly keeping them at arm's length. The event chairman publicly acknowledged my generous anonymous donation during his speech, and while he respected my request not to name me, the meaningful glance in my direction ensured everyone knew the source. The polite applause that followed carried an undercurrent of collective understanding. As I left the gala, I passed close to their table. Gabriella was staring at her phone, her expression troubled. Shawn was watching me, his face unreadable. "Enjoying your new beginning?" I asked softly, the first words I had spoken directly to him in 4 months. Before he could respond, I walked away, feeling the weight of his gaze between my shoulder blades where the phoenix spread its wings. Phase 1 was complete. The foundation of their relationship, built on betrayal and public humiliation of me, was beginning to crumble under the weight of professional setbacks, social isolation, and the first whispers of financial strain. They had expected me to disappear into broken-hearted obscurity. Instead, I had re-emerged stronger, more successful, and with a clear message. This was just the beginning. 5 months into my new life, I expanded my strategy beyond subtle pressure to active dismantling of Shawn and Gabriella's carefully constructed reality. While Phase 1 had created cracks in their foundation, Phase 2 would target the structural supports of their relationship and professional standing. My first expanded move centered on Gabriella's fabricated credentials. The MBA from Northwestern she had claimed on her resume, the qualification that had helped her secure her position at Shawn's firm, was a complete fabrication, as my private investigator had confirmed. I arranged coffee with Meredith Collins, the HR director at Shawn's firm, ostensibly to discuss potential collaboration between our companies on a recruitment initiative. Our conversation flowed naturally from industry trends to best practices, until I casually mentioned the recent high-profile case of a financial executive fired for resume fraud. It's surprising how many firms don't thoroughly verify educational credentials, I remarked. At Vertex, we've implemented a comprehensive verification process, especially for employees with access to sensitive client information. Meredith nodded emphatically. We've actually just strengthened our verification policies after a recent situation. Her meaningful pause told me everything I needed to know. They were already investigating Gabriella. I simply smiled and steered the conversation elsewhere, my work already done. The seed had been planted months ago with an anonymous tip. Now I was simply accelerating the harvest. 3 days later, Emma texted, "Emergency meeting at S's firm. G called in by HR and senior partners. S looks like he's about to explode." The second expanded front involved Shawn's new prize client, Westridge Capital. Using the documentation Josh had provided, I prepared a comprehensive analysis of their questionable practices, then anonymously submitted it to the financial regulatory authorities. I didn't allege fraud directly, just highlighted patterns requiring further investigation, and included enough documentation to ensure they couldn't dismiss it. Simultaneously, I arranged for Vertex to pitch Westridge's main competitor, positioning myself as the account lead with unique insights into market vulnerabilities. When we secured the account, I made sure the press release emphasized my role and expertise. The industry newsletter coverage was gratifyingly direct. Taylor's strategic approach directly challenges marketing positions established by Reynolds Capital Management for competitor Westridge, raising questions about market viability for both financial entities. Shawn would recognize the deliberate encroachment on his professional territory. More importantly, his partners would see it too. The third and most personal expansion of my strategy targeted the narrative of their relationship. Through Emma and other social connections, I had perpetuated the whispered truth that Gabriella was not Shawn's first office affair. There had been 2 others that I had forgiven and kept private to protect our marriage. Information I had never shared until now, and only with selected individuals who could be counted on to spread it further. The revelation transformed public perception of their relationship from an unfortunate but perhaps genuine love story to just another episode in Shawn's pattern of inappropriate behavior. It simultaneously cast me as the long-suffering wife who had protected his reputation at my own expense, and Gabriella as just the latest in a series of workplace conquests. "The country club practically vibrates when they enter," Emma reported, after a weekend luncheon. Caroline Miller actually stood up and moved tables when they were seated near her. Gabriella tried to engage Jennifer Wilson in conversation about the charity committee, and Jennifer looked right through her as if she weren't there. "And Shawn?" I asked, updating my strategy wall with this new information. "Drinking too much, checking his phone constantly. Snapped at the server twice. The pressure was building. Time to increase it further." My lawyer filed a motion to depose Gabriella in the divorce proceedings, citing her as a material witness to financial decisions made during the marriage. The legal justification was sound. She had been Shawn's secretary with access to his calendar, communications, and financial documentation. But the real purpose was strategic, forcing her to testify under oath about when their relationship began, potentially exposing both her lies and Shawn's. The notification arrived during an important client meeting at Shawn's firm. Emma's sources reported that Gabriella had received the document, burst into tears, and locked herself in the restroom for over an hour, causing Shawn to miss half the presentation. That evening, I received another call from Shawn, which I again let go to voicemail. "This has to stop." His voice sounded ragged, desperate. "The deposition is unnecessary and you know it. Tell me what you want, Kayla. Name your price." I forwarded the message to my lawyer with instructions to respond with a simple truth. This isn't about money. This is about accountability. The following week brought a development I hadn't orchestrated, but that fit perfectly into my strategy. Gabriella's previous employer in Chicago, where she had left after another affair with a married executive, reached out to Shawn's firm with concerns about potential reference check fraud. Apparently, someone had inquired about her employment history, triggering an internal review that revealed discrepancies. I hadn't made that inquiry, but I had a strong suspicion that Meredith in HR, alerted by our conversation about credential verification, had initiated a more thorough background check. The dominoes were falling faster now, gaining momentum on their own. Shawn's partnership review was moved up again, now scheduled for the following week. Westridge Capital received formal notice of a regulatory inquiry. 3 more clients requested transfers to other partners at the firm. Meanwhile, my professional star continued to rise. Vertex offered me a director position with equity participation. My client portfolio expanded to include 2 Fortune 500 companies. The Business Journal that had once featured Shawn on its 40 under 40 list now requested an interview with me for their Women Transforming Finance issue. I used the interview strategically, never mentioning Shawn or my divorce directly, but weaving a narrative of professional rebirth after personal challenge. "Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best version of yourself," I told the interviewer, knowing the quote would be featured prominently. When the article was published, I made sure copies were circulated to Shawn's professional network. The striking photo accompanying the piece, me in my power suit with the Phoenix pendant clearly visible, conveyed exactly the message I intended. I wasn't just surviving, I was soaring. The most satisfying expansion of my revenge came in the form of their deteriorating relationship. My sources reported increasingly public arguments, Gabriella's tearful phone calls in the office restroom, Shawn staying late at work to avoid going home. The romance that had been worth destroying my marriage for was crumbling under real-world pressures. "She moved into the guest bedroom," Emma reported after a conversation with their cleaning service provider, another previously overlooked source of intelligence I had cultivated. Shawn sleeping in the master alone, the final element of my expanded strategy, was set in motion when I closed on a house, not just any house, but the modernist showplace directly across the street from the home Shawn and I had shared, where he and Gabriella were now living. The property had been on the market for years, considered overpriced and too avant-garde for the traditional neighborhood. For me, it was perfect. The statement it made, that I could and would establish myself literally in view of their daily lives, was worth every penny of the considerable investment. The day after closing, I sent Shawn a text message, the first direct communication I had initiated, looking forward to being neighbors again. I've always loved the view from your bedroom window. Within an hour, Emma called. "Shawn just put the house on the market, listed it 20 minutes ago. They're moving out." I smiled as I added another red thread to my strategy wall, connecting this latest development to the web of pressure points I had been systematically exploiting. They were running, but they couldn't hide from the consequences I had set in motion. Phase 2 was unfolding perfectly. The scope of my revenge had expanded beyond their relationship to encompass their professional standing, social connections, financial security, and peace of mind. Each aspect of their lives that had seemed so solid when they humiliated me at our anniversary dinner was now fracturing under precision-targeted pressure, and I was just getting started. 6 months after the anniversary dinner, Shawn and Gabriella were showing unmistakable signs of strain. What had begun as small cracks in their perfect facade had developed into structural damage visible to everyone in their professional and social circles. I observed their deterioration from a calculated distance, gathering intelligence through my network while maintaining my own upward trajectory. My new home, directly across from their rapidly depreciating property, remained empty except for strategic renovation crews. I had no intention of actually living there. The property was purely an investment in their discomfort. They dropped the asking price again, Emma reported over our weekly lunch. Third reduction in 2 weeks. Gabriella is apparently furious. She'd already started working with an interior designer for their new place. I nodded, savoring my salmon as I absorbed this information. Any bites? None. Everyone knows why they're selling. Caroline Miller told her book club it was tainted property now, bought with his first wife's money and soiled by his affair. Emma shook her head. Suburban social circles can be brutal. Indeed, I agreed, thinking of the careful cultivation of those very social connections I had maintained during my marriage. The invitations to dinner parties, the remembered birthdays and anniversaries, the thoughtful gifts for children's graduations. All investments that were now paying dividends in the form of collective rejection of Shawn and Gabriella. The professional front was yielding even more dramatic results. Josh called that evening with an update that exceeded my expectations. Gabriella's been terminated, he reported without preamble. The credential verification came back definitively negative. No, MBA, and her undergraduate degree was in theater, not business as she claimed. She was escorted out this afternoon. I maintained my composure despite the surge of satisfaction. How did Shawn handle it? That's the thing. He tried to intervene, claimed they were targeting her because of their relationship, made a scene in front of clients. The managing partner had to pull him into a private office. Josh's voice lowered. Kayla, they've moved up his partnership review again. It's tomorrow morning. This was accelerating faster than even I had anticipated. What's the expected outcome? Josh hesitated. Best case for him, probation and reassignment of key accounts. Worst case, well, they're reviewing the morality clause in the partnership agreement. I thanked Josh for the information and hung up, immediately updating my strategy wall. The red threads connecting Gabriella's false credentials to Shawn's professional standing vibrated with imminent impact. One domino falling into another, precisely as I had designed. Later that night, I received a text from an unknown number. This is Gabriella. We need to talk. Please. I stared at the message, considering my options. Direct engagement wasn't part of my original strategy, but adaptability was essential to any successful campaign. I replied with an address, a neutral, coffee shop downtown, and a time for the following afternoon. The next morning, Emma called with breaking news. Shawn's been placed on administrative leave pending review. It's all over the firm. Josh called an emergency partner meeting after Shawn left. Interesting timing, I remarked, though it was anything but coincidental. Josh had been fed specific information about Westridge Capital's irregularities at carefully timed intervals, ensuring maximum impact when combined with Shawn's increasingly erratic behavior. There's more, Emma continued. Westridge Capital received formal notice of an SEC investigation. Their stock dropped 12% this morning. Another domino falling. My anonymous submission to the regulatory authorities had found its mark. Shawn's prize client, the relationship he had been counting on to secure his professional future, was now toxic. Even if he survived the partnership review, his judgment in bringing Westridge to the firm would be questioned for years. I dressed for my meeting with Gabriella with particular care. A power suit in deep blue that conveyed confidence without ostentation, my phoenix pendant visible at my throat. When I arrived at the coffee shop, she was already waiting, almost unrecognizable from the polished, confident secretary who had stood beside Shawn at our anniversary dinner. Her designer clothes hung loosely on her frame, suggesting recent weight loss. Her makeup couldn't hide the shadows beneath her eyes or the tension in her jaw. As I approached, she straightened, attempting to project composure that quickly crumbled when I sat across from her. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice lacking its usual assurance. "I wouldn't have reached out if I had any other option." "What do you want, Gabriella?" I kept my tone neutral, neither warm nor hostile. "It needs to stop." Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her coffee cup. "The investigation, the deposition, all of it. You've made your point." I raised an eyebrow. "Have I? What point would that be? That you can destroy us." Her voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables before she caught herself. "You've systematically undermined everything. My job, Shawn's partnership, our social standing, even our home." She leaned forward. "What will it take to end this? Why do you assume I'm responsible? For your current difficulties?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perception. Her laugh was brittle. "Please, the anonymous tip about my credentials, the Westridge investigation, moving in across the street, these aren't coincidences." I sipped my tea, letting the moment stretch. "Gabriella, have you considered that your current problems might be natural consequences rather than orchestrated revenge? You built a life on lies, your fake MBA, your relationship with a married man. Shawn gambled his professional reputation on a client with questionable finances while publicly humiliating his wife of 8 years. I set down my cup. Actions have consequences. So you admit you're behind all this? I admit nothing, I replied calmly. I'm simply suggesting that perhaps the foundation of your relationship with Shawn wasn't strong enough to withstand reality. Her facade cracked further. He's changing, Kayla. The man I fell in love with. He's different now. Angry all the time. Drinking too much. Blaming me for his professional problems. Tears welled in her eyes. This isn't what I thought it would be. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered how she had meticulously planned my humiliation, carefully selecting my anniversary as the perfect occasion to publicly claim my husband. What did you think it would be, Gabriella? Did you imagine that betraying your employer's wife would lead to happiness? That stealing another woman's husband would result in trust? That lying about your qualifications would never be discovered? I kept my voice soft but direct. You and Shawn designed this outcome the moment you chose deception over integrity. She wiped away tears, smearing her expensive mascara. What do you want from us? Just tell me and maybe we can— I don't want anything from you, I interrupted. That's what you and Shawn have never understood. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't something you can fix with the right price or the right apology. I stood, gathering my purse. I'm not doing anything to you, Gabriella. I'm simply living my life successfully while you both face the consequences of your choices. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I heard her call after me. He still loves you. He said it last night when he was drunk. Said he made a terrible mistake. I didn't turn around, but I smiled. Another piece of intelligence to add to my collection. Another pressure point to leverage at the right moment. That evening, as I updated my strategy wall with notes from the encounter, my phone rang with a call from Josh. It's official, he said without preamble. Shawn's been removed from the partnership, effective immediately. Severance is being negotiated, but his equity stake is forfeit under the morality clause. 8 years of Shawn's career, his carefully constructed professional identity, his financial security, all gone in 6 months. Not through any direct action I had taken against him, but through the inevitable consequences of his own choices, accelerated by the strategic application of pressure at his weakest points. Later that night, I received a text from Emma. S just showed up at your old house completely drunk, screaming at G on the front lawn. Neighbors called police. He was escorted away. I added the information to my timeline. The pressure was reaching critical levels. Soon, very soon, the complete collapse I had engineered would be unavoidable. As if on cue, my phone lit up with Shawn's number. This time, I answered. Kayla. His voice was slurred, desperate. You've won, okay? You fucking won. What more do you want from me? I want nothing from you, Shawn, I replied calmly. I never did. Bullshit, he shouted. You've systematically destroyed everything I've built. No, Shawn. You did that yourself when you chose to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. I'm simply living well. Isn't that supposed to be the best revenge? His bitter laugh held no humor. This goes way beyond living well, and you know it. Perhaps, I conceded. But then, your betrayal went way beyond a simple affair, didn't it? You orchestrated my public humiliation. You're simply experiencing the consequences of that choice. The line went silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, something like the old Shawn breaking through the angry shell. I made a mistake, Kayla. A terrible mistake. Yes, I agreed. You did. I ended the call and turned back to my strategy wall. The betrayers were now fully under pressure, their relationship fracturing, their professional and social standing in ruins. Phase 3 could now begin, the final collapse that would mirror and exceed the public humiliation they had inflicted on me. 7 months after the anniversary dinner, the carefully constructed lives of Shawn and Gabriella began unraveling at a pace that even I found startling. What had been a controlled demolition was rapidly becoming an avalanche, with each new development triggering multiple consequences across their personal and professional lives. The catalyst was the formal announcement of Shawn's departure from the firm. The carefully worded press release cited personal reasons for his exit, but the financial industry thrives on gossip. By mid-afternoon, 3 different versions of the story were circulating. One involving ethical breaches with Westridge Capital, another focused on his relationship with Gabriella, and a third suggesting financial impropriety. None of these narratives needed my encouragement. They spread organically through the networks I had cultivated, growing more damaging with each retelling. By evening, Shawn's professional reputation lay in tatters. Emma called with the social fallout. They've been dropped from the club membership committee's consideration, and the invitation to the Wilsons' annual holiday party was rescinded. Caroline personally called to tell Gabriella they weren't welcome. The property across from their house, my strategic investment, received its first renovation deliveries that same day. Trucks arrived early in the morning, unloading materials with just enough noise to be noticeable without violating any ordinances. The architect I'd hired made a point of examining the property line shared with Shawn's house, taking numerous photos and making notes. By nightfall, Shawn was calling again. I let it go to voicemail. This has to stop, his message slurred, suggesting he was drinking again. The firm is spreading lies about me. Westridge is threatening to sue. No one will even take my calls. Is this what you wanted? I forwarded the message to my lawyer without comment. The following morning brought the next major blow. Westridge Capital issued a formal statement distancing themselves from Shawn and indicating they were exploring legal options regarding potentially misleading advice. Their stock dropped another 8% as investor confidence waned in the wake of the SEC investigation. Financially, the impact on Shawn was catastrophic. His severance package, already reduced by the morality clause invocation, was now held in abeyance pending potential legal claims. His partnership equity remained frozen. The compensation he had counted on to maintain his lifestyle and manage his mounting legal expenses was suddenly uncertain. Emma reported that Gabriella had been seen removing her more expensive possessions from the house: artwork, jewelry, designer handbags, suggesting she was preparing for either a rapid departure or securing valuables against financial distress. Their social isolation intensified as former friends and colleagues actively avoided them. At a restaurant downtown, my source reported that a group of executives from Shawn's former firm actually got up and moved to another section when Shawn and Gabriella entered. She was overheard saying, "This is humiliating," before they abandoned their dinner entirely. The real estate agent handling their property called to inform me there had been 0 inquiries despite the third price reduction. "People know the situation," she explained delicately. "Nobody wants to purchase a home with that kind of energy." I increased the pressure further by accepting a featured speaker role at the financial industry conference where Shawn had been scheduled to participate on a panel. The organizers, aware of his recent departure from the firm, had scrambled to find a replacement. When my name was suggested by one of my new clients, they jumped at the opportunity. The announcement went out via industry newsletter. Kayla Taylor, rising star at Vertex Marketing and specialist in financial services reputation management, replaces Shawn Reynolds on the Future of Investment Advisory panel. This public professional substitution, me literally taking his place on a stage he had coveted, represented a symbolic final blow to his career identity. That afternoon, Gabriella made her move. Emma's cleaners reported that she had packed her remaining belongings while Shawn was meeting with his lawyers. By evening, she was gone, leaving only a note on the kitchen counter that the cleaners glimpsed but couldn't read in full. The timing couldn't have been more perfect if I had orchestrated it myself, which I hadn't needed to. The betrayer had been betrayed, abandoned by the woman for whom he had sacrificed everything. Shawn's final voice message that night was barely coherent. "She's gone. She fucking left." "Are you happy now, Kayla? Is this what you wanted? My life is destroyed. I've lost everything." The unraveling had accelerated beyond my carefully planned timeline, propelled by the natural consequences of their actions and the mounting pressures of public disgrace, financial uncertainty, and mutual recrimination. That night, I stood before my strategy wall, removing the pins and threads one by one. The elaborate map of vulnerabilities and pressure points that had guided my campaign was no longer necessary. The momentum of their collapse had taken on a life of its own, fueled by the very social and professional mechanisms they had once used to their advantage. I had succeeded not by attacking them directly, but by strategically undermining the foundations of their relationship and professional standing, then allowing natural consequences to take their course. Their collapse, when it came, was both comprehensive and self-perpetuating. As I removed the last thread from the wall, my phone lit up with a text from Josh. "Shawn's asking to meet with me tomorrow. Says he wants to make things right." "What?" "Should I tell him?" I smiled as I replied. "Tell him it's too late." 8 months after the anniversary dinner, Shawn's complete collapse played out with a swiftness and totality that exceeded even my calculated expectations. What had begun as strategic pressure points applied to carefully identified vulnerabilities had cascaded into a comprehensive destruction of everything he valued. The morning after Gabriella's departure, Shawn appeared at Josh's office, unshaven and disheveled, practically begging for assistance with potential clients. Josh, uncomfortable but professional, explained that the firm's partners had implemented a non-contact policy regarding their former colleague. "He just stood there, staring at me," Josh reported later that day. Then he said, "She planned all of this, didn't she? Right from the beginning." I didn't have to ask who she was. Professionally, Shawn's fall from grace was now complete. His name had been removed from the firm's website and marketing materials. Former clients were being systematically reassigned to other partners. The office he had decorated with such pride, with its view of the financial district and carefully curated art, was already being prepared for his replacement. Worse, Word of his situation had spread throughout the industry. 3 potential employers who had initially expressed interest in his services withdrew their inquiries after conducting basic due diligence calls. His professional identity, so carefully constructed over decades, had been dismantled in months. Financially, the disaster was equally absolute. The SEC investigation into Westridge Capital had expanded to include examination of Shawn's personal involvement and potential conflicts of interest. His brokerage accounts were frozen pending regulatory review. The severance package that might have provided temporary stability remained in legal limbo, tied up in disputes about contractual obligations and potential liability. Emma reported that bill collectors had begun calling the house. The luxury car leases Shawn had been so proud of were now in default. Credit card companies were suspending accounts. The financial infrastructure of his life was collapsing as rapidly as his professional reputation. Socially, his isolation was now absolute. The invitations had stopped entirely. Former friends crossed the street to avoid interaction. His parents, embarrassed by the public nature of his downfall, had retreated to their winter home in Florida without their usual invitation for him to join them. Most devastating of all was Gabriella's very public betrayal. She had not simply left him, she had strategically abandoned ship at the moment of maximum damage. My private investigator confirmed she had moved in with a former client of Shawn's, a divorced venture capitalist, 20 years her senior, with the financial stability Shawn could no longer provide. The final blow came in the form of a detailed exposé in the business journal that had once celebrated Shawn's success. Titled "The Fall," the article methodically chronicled his professional and personal collapse, drawing explicit connections between his ethical lapses with Westridge Capital and his betrayal of his marriage. Without ever mentioning my name or directly referencing the anniversary dinner, the piece painted a devastating portrait of hubris and self-destruction. I had not planted the story. I hadn't needed to. The journalist had simply followed the trail of professional wreckage, interviewing former colleagues and clients who were all too willing to distance themselves from Shawn's disgrace by contributing to the narrative of his fall. The morning the article was published, I received a text from Emma. "S's car has been parked outside your building since 6 a.m. Security called me because he's just sitting there, not moving. Should I be concerned?" I checked the security cameras accessible through my building's app. Shawn's once immaculate luxury sedan was now visibly neglected, with a dent in the passenger door and dirt dulling the custom paint. Inside, I could make out his silhouette, slumped and motionless. After 8 years of marriage and 8 months of calculated revenge, I knew exactly what this meant. Shawn had reached his breaking point. The successful, confident man who had orchestrated my public humiliation was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized, desperate, isolated, and completely broken. I called building security and asked them to allow him up. 20 minutes later, my doorman announced Shawn's arrival. I took a deep breath, adjusted my phoenix pendant, and opened the door. The man who stood before me bore little resemblance to the husband who had toasted his new love at our anniversary dinner 8 months earlier. His expensive suit hung loosely on his frame. His carefully maintained appearance had deteriorated into stubble and hollow eyes. The confident posture that had once announced his success to every room he entered was now a defeated slouch. "Kayla," he said, his voice hoarse. "You've won. It's over. Everything's gone." I stepped aside, allowing him into the apartment that symbolized my new independence. "Come in, Shawn. I think it's time we talked." He entered slowly, his gaze taking in the physical manifestation of my transformation, the modern art he would have hated, the awards from my rapidly advancing career displayed prominently, the view of the financial district now from my vantage point rather than his. As I closed the door behind him, I felt no triumph, no joy in his destruction. Only the cool satisfaction of justice perfectly executed and a chapter finally ready to close. Shawn stood in the center of my living room, a stranger in familiar skin. His eyes darted around the space, taking in each detail of my new life. The sleek furniture so different from our traditional suburban aesthetic, the view he had once commanded now serving as my backdrop, the subtle but unmistakable absence of any reference to our shared past. "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked, the polite hostess even now. "Scotch, if you have it," he replied, his voice rough from what I suspected was too much of the same request elsewhere. I poured him a modest portion of the single malt I kept for clients, not enough to fuel further deterioration, just enough to steady his obvious trembling. As I handed him the glass, I noticed the indentation on his ring finger where his wedding band had been until recently. "Nice place," he said after a long sip, gesturing vaguely at my apartment. "Must be doing well." "I am," I confirmed without elaboration. I sat in my favorite chair, leaving him standing awkwardly until he finally settled on the edge of the sofa. The power dynamic between us had inverted so completely, it was almost difficult to remember a time when he had dominated every room, every conversation, every decision. "You orchestrated all of this," he said finally. Not a question, but a realization. "From the very beginning," I didn't confirm or deny. "What exactly is all of this, Shawn?" His laugh was hollow. "Don't be coy, Kayla. It doesn't suit you." He took another sip. "My partnership, my clients, my reputation, Gabriella's job, her credential exposure, the house that won't sell, the regulatory investigation, the article." His eyes found mine, recognition finally dawning. "It wasn't random bad luck. It was you, systematically destroying everything I built, everything we built." "No," I corrected gently. "You destroyed what we built the moment you chose to humiliate me at our anniversary dinner. I simply ensured you experienced appropriate consequences." He flinched at the precision of my response. The dinner was Gabriella's idea. She thought it would be cleaner. One public announcement, and then we could move forward without hiding. "How considerate," I replied, my tone neutral despite the surge of cold anger. "And did she suggest your little speech about authentic love and following your heart as well? Or was that your own flourish?" Shawn stared into his glass. "I thought I loved her. And now? Now I realize I destroyed the only real thing in my life for a fantasy." He looked up, his eyes suddenly earnest. "Kayla, I made a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life." I studied him carefully, seeing not genuine remorse, but desperate self-preservation. Shawn wasn't sorry he had betrayed me. He was sorry he had miscalculated so catastrophically. "Why are you here, Shawn? What do you want from me?" He set down his glass, leaning forward with the intensity he had once used to close million-dollar deals. "Make it stop, please. You've made your point. I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, Gabriella, our home. Isn't that enough?" "That depends," I said, maintaining my composure. "What do you think would be enough for publicly humiliating your wife of 8 years? For throwing away our marriage for a woman who abandoned you the moment things got difficult? For lying to our friends, our family, your colleagues about the kind of man you really are?" His facade cracked further. "I didn't come here to be lectured. I came to negotiate." "Negotiate?" I raised an eyebrow. "What exactly do you have to offer, Shawn? Your assets are frozen. Your professional reputation is in ruins. Your social standing is non-existent. What possible terms could you propose?" He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, desperation evident in every gesture. "I can give you everything in the divorce, the house, the investments, all of it. Just call off whatever you're doing behind the scenes. Help me salvage something from this wreckage." I almost pitied him then. Almost. He still didn't understand that this had never been about money or possessions. It had been about justice, about consequences proportional to his actions. "There's nothing to call off, Shawn. I'm not orchestrating your current difficulties. I'm simply living my life successfully while you face the natural repercussions of your choices. His expression hardened. Bullshit. This is calculated revenge. You've systematically destroyed everything that matters to me. No, Shawn, I replied, calmly. You destroyed everything that should have mattered to you the moment you decided our marriage was disposable. All I did was make sure you couldn't enjoy the spoils of your betrayal. So, that's it? You're just going to sit there in your perfect new life and watch me drown? I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. What happens to you now is entirely up to you. My work is done. Your work? He laughed bitterly. You make it sound like a job. I allowed myself a small smile. In a way, it was. You always said I lacked strategic thinking and professional focus. Thank you for the motivation to develop those skills. Shawn's face drained of color as the full realization hit him. You planned all of this, not in a rage, not an emotional reaction, but as a calculated campaign. From the very beginning. You taught me well, I acknowledged. All those lectures about strategic patience, about identifying vulnerabilities, about seizing opportunities. I was an excellent student. He stood slowly, the defeated slouch more pronounced now. I never knew you. Not really. That was your greatest mistake, I agreed, walking him to the door. Not the affair, not even the public humiliation. Your greatest error was underestimating me. As he stepped into the hallway, he turned back one last time. Is there anything left to salvage, Kayla? Anything at all? I touched the phoenix pendant at my throat, the symbol of my transformation. Not for us, Shawn. That chapter is closed. But for you, that depends on whether you learn from this experience or continue blaming others for the consequences of your actions. As the elevator doors closed on his broken expression, I felt the final weight of our shared past lift from my shoulders. The confrontation I had strategically delayed until his complete collapse was now complete. Justice, meticulously planned, and perfectly executed, had been served. I returned to my living room window, gazing out at the city I had made my own. The woman reflected in the glass, confident, powerful, completely self-possessed, bore little resemblance to the shell-shocked wife who had walked out of La Maison 8 months earlier. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, untroubled by dreams of revenge or justice. That chapter was finished. Tomorrow would begin something entirely new. 10 days after Shawn's visit to my apartment, our divorce was finalized with surprising efficiency. His lawyer, recognizing the futility of further negotiation given his client's comprehensive collapse, accepted terms that would have been unthinkable months earlier. I received everything I was entitled to, and then some, not because I needed or particularly wanted his assets, but because the settlement represented a final acknowledgement of what he had taken from me. I signed the papers with a steady hand, closing that chapter of my life with the same deliberate focus with which I had orchestrated its conclusion. Are you sure you don't want to celebrate? Emma asked when I called to tell her it was official. I could bring champagne, or we could go out somewhere nice. No celebration necessary, I told her. It's just paperwork catching up to reality. But, thank you. After hanging up, I stood in my silent apartment, waiting for the rush of vindication or closure I had expected to feel. Instead, I experienced something more complex. Not regret, certainly, but a quiet contemplation of everything that had transpired over the past 8 months. The execution of my carefully planned revenge had consumed me so completely that I hadn't fully considered what would come after. Who was I now that this driving purpose had been fulfilled? What would fill the space previously occupied by strategic planning and methodical execution? The following morning, I woke before dawn and went for a long run along the river, something I had started doing during my self-imposed exile months earlier. The rhythm of my footsteps on the path created a meditative state that allowed me to process thoughts that had been simmering below the surface of my consciousness. My revenge had been perfect in its execution, proportional, methodical, and ultimately, justice rather than mere retaliation. Shawn and Gabriella had experienced consequences precisely calibrated to their actions, losing everything they had gained through betrayal and then some. I had reclaimed my power and emerged stronger, more capable, more authentically myself than I had been in years. Yet something unexpected had occurred in the process. The woman who had walked out of La Maison that night, hurt, humiliated, but determined, had transformed into someone I was still getting to know. The skills I had developed to orchestrate Shawn's downfall, strategic thinking, network cultivation, patient execution, were now integral parts of my professional and personal identity. What would I do with these capabilities now that my original purpose for developing them had been fulfilled? The answer began to take shape during a lunch meeting with Elsa the following week. She had invited me to discuss a potential promotion that would make me the youngest partner in Vertex's history. "Your client portfolio has expanded faster than anyone we've ever seen," she explained over seafood salads at my favorite bistro. "But it's more than that. You have an exceptional ability to identify leverage points and strategic advantages. The other partners are impressed, and frankly, a little intimidated." I smiled at that. Intimidated? That seems excessive. Not at all. There's something formidable about you, Kayla. Like you're playing several moves ahead while everyone else is focused on their immediate position. She studied me with genuine curiosity. "I'd love to know where you developed that particular skill set." "Life experience," I replied, thinking of the elaborate strategy wall that had once dominated my apartment, now dismantled and discarded. "I've had some excellent teachers, though they didn't realize they were instructing me at the time." The conversation shifted to the specifics of the partnership offer, but Elsa's observation lingered in my mind. The skills I had honed for revenge could be redirected toward creation and growth. The strategic acumen I had developed could serve purposes beyond justice. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Josh. The subject line was simply, "Thought you should know. Kayla, I'm reaching out because I thought you should be aware of recent developments. Shawn has accepted a position with a small financial advisory firm in Seattle. Entry-level, focusing on individual clients rather than corporate accounts. A significant step down, but perhaps a chance for him to rebuild something. Gabriella has apparently moved on to her next target, a senior partner at Richardson and Meyer. Her LinkedIn profile now claims she's pursuing an MBA part-time. I'm not sharing. This because I think you care about their futures, but because I thought it might provide some closure to know they're no longer in your orbit. On a personal note, I want to say how impressed I've been with your resilience and transformation. If you're ever interested in bringing your talents to our firm, my door is always open." Best, Josh. I closed the email, surprised by my own lack of interest in Shawn and Gabriella's fates. They had occupied so much of my mental and emotional energy for months, yet now they seemed like characters from a book I had finished reading, their stories continuing but no longer relevant to mine. That night, I made a decision. The next chapter of my life would not be defined by the shadow of betrayal or the echo of revenge. It would be something entirely new, something I would build by choice rather than necessity. I accepted Vertex's partnership offer the following morning, negotiating terms that reflected my value to the firm and my vision for future growth. I also made an appointment with a real estate agent to list the property across from Shawn's former house. The investment I had made purely as an instrument of psychological pressure was now simply an underperforming asset. As I prepared for bed that evening, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was neither the accommodating wife Shawn had betrayed, nor the calculating strategist who had orchestrated his downfall. She was someone new, stronger for having been broken, wiser for having navigated darkness, and now ready to direct her formidable abilities toward creating rather than dismantling. I touched the phoenix pendant at my throat, tracing its delicate wings with my fingertip. The symbol had served its purpose, marking my transformation from ashes to rebirth. Perhaps it was time for something new, a symbol of the future rather than a commemoration of the past. Tomorrow, I decided, I would begin looking for that new symbol, that new direction. The revenge that had consumed me was complete. The void it left behind wasn't emptiness but possibility, an open space ready to be filled with whatever I chose to create next. 1 year after the anniversary dinner that had shattered my life, I stood at the podium of the grand ballroom at the Westridge Hotel, ironically named given the role Westridge Capital had played in my revenge strategy. The audience before me included the most influential figures in the financial marketing industry, gathered for the annual Excellence in Financial Communications Awards. It is my great pleasure to announce that the winner of this year's Innovation in Client Engagement Award is Vertex Marketing, led by partner Kayla Taylor. Applause filled the room as I accepted the Crystal Trophy, the culmination of a marketing campaign I had conceptualized and executed for one of the country's largest ethical investment firms. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had become known for bringing transparency and authenticity to financial communications, qualities so notably absent from my former marriage. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady and confident as I addressed the audience. This recognition belongs to the entire Vertex team, who embraced a vision built on the radical notion that honesty can actually be good business. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but I continued with purpose. A year ago, I learned a painful but valuable lesson about the cost of deception, both to those who are deceived and ultimately to those who choose to deceive. That experience transformed not just my personal perspective, but my professional approach as well. I scanned the audience, noting several former associates of Shawn's among the attendees. The campaign we're being recognized for tonight demonstrates that transparency builds stronger client relationships than any amount of strategic obfuscation. In both business and life, the truth may be occasionally uncomfortable, but authentic connections are ultimately more valuable than comfortable illusions. As I concluded my brief remarks to enthusiastic applause, I caught sight of Josh at a table near the front, nodding with understanding of the dual meaning in my words. We had maintained a respectful professional relationship, occasionally collaborating on projects where our firm's interests aligned. Later that evening, during the reception, he approached with 2 glasses of champagne. "Congratulations," he said, handing me one. Quite the full-circle moment. I accepted the glass with a smile. Life does have a certain poetry to it sometimes. "Have you heard the latest?" he asked, keeping his voice low despite the bustling crowd around us. "I haven't been keeping track," I replied honestly. Shawn's firm in Seattle closed its doors. Regulatory issues, apparently. He studied my face for a reaction. And Gabriella's engagement to that Richardson partner ended rather abruptly when his wife showed the firm evidence of their relationship. I took a sip of champagne, feeling nothing, but a distant acknowledgement of cosmic justice continuing its course without my involvement. "I wish them clarity," I said finally. Josh raised an eyebrow. "Clarity, not happiness or success." "Clarity is the prerequisite for both," I explained. "Understanding the consequences of your choices is the only path to genuine growth." He nodded, thoughtfully. "You've certainly found yours." After the gala, I returned to my apartment, not the downtown showplace I had initially chosen as a statement of independence, but a warmer, more personal space in an artist's district that better reflected who I had become. The walls displayed original works by local painters. The bookshelves held volumes on psychology and philosophy alongside marketing strategy and financial theory, and the terrace hosted a thriving herb garden. My life had expanded beyond the confines of revenge into something richer and more authentic. The partnership at Vertex had evolved into a leadership role where I mentored younger women navigating male-dominated industries. I served on the board of a nonprofit supporting survivors of domestic abuse. I had even begun writing a book about resilience and reinvention after betrayal. Not as a revenge narrative, but as a blueprint for transformation. Most surprisingly, I had allowed new people into my life. Not just colleagues and professional connections, but friends who knew nothing of my past with Shawn, who valued me for who I was now rather than in relation to my former marriage. And recently, tentatively, a relationship with someone who saw me clearly and appreciated the strength that had emerged from my ordeal. As I prepared for bed that night, exactly 1 year after the dinner that had changed everything, I removed the phoenix pendant I had worn daily during my campaign of justice. It had served its purpose, marking a transformation now complete. In its place, I selected a simple silver compass rose that had caught my eye in an artisan's shop during a weekend trip to the coast. The compass represented what I now understood about myself, that regardless of external circumstances, I possessed an internal guidance system that would always orient me toward my true north. The lessons learned through betrayal and its aftermath had calibrated that compass, ensuring I would never again lose sight of my own value or power. I fell asleep that night, not dwelling on the past, but anticipating the future. One I was creating, deliberately, consciously, and entirely on my own terms. The following morning, I woke to an email from my publisher confirming the release date for my book. The working title had evolved from the revenge-focused concept I had initially proposed to something more universal and ultimately more powerful: Reclaiming Your Compass, Transformation After Betrayal. As I prepared for a meeting with a potential new client, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me bore little physical resemblance to the carefully curated corporate wife who had entered La Maison a year earlier. My hair was now worn in a style of my own choosing. My clothing expressed personal taste rather than calculated appropriateness, and my eyes held a confidence born of hard-won self-knowledge. But the more profound transformation lay beneath the surface, in the woman who had discovered her own capacity for strategic brilliance, who had channeled righteous anger into precise action, and who had ultimately recognized that her greatest power lay not in destroying another's life, but in creating her own. Shawn and Gabriella had inadvertently given me the most valuable gift possible: the opportunity to discover who I truly was when everything familiar was stripped away. Their betrayal had broken open my carefully constructed life, revealing a strength and resilience I might never have discovered otherwise. As I left my apartment that morning, stepping confidently into the next chapter of my life, I felt genuine gratitude for the journey. Not for the betrayal itself, but for the woman I had become because of it. The husband who had left me for his secretary had unwittingly set me free to become someone far more extraordinary than the supportive wife I had been trained to be. His loss. My rebirth. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Happy anniversary of your Freedom Day. Dinner tonight to celebrate?" I smiled as I replied, "Absolutely. And let's make it somewhere new. I'm in the mood for adventure." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.